Hello, everyone. It's Mrs. Wallace. How are you? I just want to give you a couple of short video clips that help you prepare for Friday's essay. This is an in-class essay. It will be handwritten. You will have a few choices of questions, and you will do one question on Friday. I do have a slide up that asks, what is paper 3? So just so you know, when you take the IB exam at the end of next year, you will sit for several papers. Paper 3 is the in-depth focus on history of the Americas. It's the part of the IB exam that HL students take that SL students do not. It is basically a set of three papers. You get 40 to 50 minutes each per paper. It's about 2.5 hours, give or take. You get a wide choice of questions, like 30-something questions, all about the history of the Americas based on different time frames. You are asked to do 3 of those 30 plus questions, so you can go into the exam very prepared for some particular content topics, and then, kind of use those particular questions to focus, your papers. The various questions are going to be different. They will include a variety of different command terms. So some of the questions might be to what extent questions. Some of the questions might be, discuss or examine or compare and contrast. And we will talk about all those varied different kinds of questions. But for Friday's activity, know that you will have a choice of to what extent questions. So we're kind of working with that particular frame today, just to give you a sense of what that is. The questions on the exam on Friday will be very similar, not exactly the same, but similar to the questions that you have on your small group activity. The questions will all have something in common. They all ask you about the causes of the Latin American independence movements. Okay, in the case of Mexico, it's really independence movement, not quite the Mexican Revolution. That's later, but the Haitian Revolution, the Mexican War of Independence, what we see in South America with like the likes of Simón Bolívar. You can look at the causes of those events. And I'm going to recommend to you that you come into the exam and kind of a focus on some of your outlines can really be what you believe to be some of the significant causes. Because if you go in knowing that, whatever the question is, the question might be to what extent, was it political grievances that caused it? To what extent was it the Enlightenment thinking that caused these revolutions? To what extent was it perhaps the economic factors or whatever it might be? If you have a good idea and a good argument in your head of what really did lead to the Haitian Revolution and what really did lead to the Mexican War of Independence, then you can, kind of work with that. And even if you think in terms of maybe root causes or long-term issues versus like triggers or short-term causes, sometimes, those can be considered differently. Okay. And we'll look at an example question. This was one of the questions that was on your sheet the other day. Wars of independence in the Americas were primarily caused by political grievances in the colonies. To what extent do you agree with this view in reference to Haiti, Mexico, and/or South America during the period of 1775 to 1824? You do want to do a couple of things to break down this question. Okay, you are asked about wars of independence in the Americas. Okay, if this question did not have in reference to Haiti, Mexico, and/or South America at the bottom, you could really also talk about the American Revolution. So we would include that in wars of independence. You could include any one of the Latin American wars of independence, but also the American Revolution. So just to give you that idea, because that might be, context that you might be able to add if this question was worded a little differently. But in this case, it says wars of independence in the Americas were primarily caused
cause. So, we can kind of assume that these wars of independence likely had multiple causes. It's probably not the case that political grievances are the only cause, but the statement is really asking you, were political grievances the primary cause? Okay, so you're asked to weigh that, to basically agree or not agree, or agree in part, agree that maybe in one particular Latin American revolution, maybe in you know, perhaps Haiti, political grievances really did become very significant to the beginning of the, revolution. Perhaps in kind of example of the Mexican War of Independence. Economic factors, weigh in, heavier, or perhaps for different groups. I heard some people talking about yesterday, maybe for the free people of color or for Creoles, who were not quite considered as political equals to either rich white planters in Haiti or peninsulares in New Spain. Maybe you had, kind of this political kind of crisis for Creoles and that, group, but maybe for indigenous peoples or mestizos or enslaved persons in Haiti, maybe some of the grievances are more economic, right? So, your task is to kind of take what you know and work it through. And because this is a to what extent question, your thesis can answer the question, but can be very specific and simply worded. Avoid flowery language in your thesis. Your thesis might be something like, in the example of the Haitian Revolution and the Mexican War of Independence, free people of color and Creoles were motivated by political inequality related to upper classes. Yet, indigenous and mestizo and enslaved populations were mostly motivated by economic inequities. Done. Okay, that is your thesis. You are not including multiple points of view in your thesis, but in your essay, when you go to push your thesis, you might have a paragraph or two paragraphs or even three paragraphs that have points that support your thesis. Okay, so specific paragraphs that make the case. And one paragraph in the example I just gave might be, the Creoles in the Mexican War for Independence were considered to not have as much political clout as peninsulares, who had basically controlled the local viceroy, just before the Mexican War for Independence and the Cry of Dolores, right? So you might kind of argue that. And you might have in that same paragraph, information about the free people of color who weren't considered citizens and are affected by the black codes, basically, from the government of France, whereas rich white planters, didn't. And you can go into some of the dynamics of the political crises between the rich white planters and and the uh, the the free people of color. Okay, so you might have that in one paragraph, you might have that in two paragraphs, but using particular knowledge and evidence along with key points, you can make the case to agree with your thesis, right? Somewhere in your essay, you also want to offer the other point of view, right? So you might suggest that there was some other kind of maybe economic role that maybe Creoles become very used to under, one time frame, a great deal of economic independence. Some of that economic independence becomes very, very much key, but yet, maybe the economic independence changes at various points. So you might have, things that are not necessarily political. You might have things that are economic. So you want to kind of play devil's advocate with yourself in your essay so that you're showcasing that it's not the only argument that Creoles were motivated by, political grievances. You might make a case that that was primary, but you might also acknowledge some of the other arguments. Okay, and that's kind of maybe going to take up a paragraph, whether you're using Haiti as an example, a Latin American War for Independence, or whichever, right? And then in the case of
the um, I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought, right? In the case of the essay, in the way that you handle this, you're looking to write 5 to 6 paragraphs. I will put a sample of a paper 3 essay that scored high. It's not about the topic that you're going to be writing about on Friday. It will be about Reconstruction, a totally different topic. You don't really have to be knowledgeable on the topic to be able to look at the essay. Something you'll notice is the introduction is very short. It offers a few sentences of context and then kind of very quickly gets to the thesis statement, and essentially like the debate that your essay is going to entertain. Your thesis statement sets forth your conclusion, and then the paragraphs are where you would include a paragraph point to start out your paragraph and then discuss some of the information. And that's where you can use, pull some of the dates and things like that, specific names and examples from your notes. Okay, so your notes should be able to help you with this. Okay, I hope that that helps a little bit. I am going to note that there is the HODA resource. All of the Latin American independence movements are in the HODA resource. It's about 8 pages. It's a really good overview. There also was some posted overviews that are short, that you can use, like connections to today. Some of you will want additional information, so I am going to do a video and drop it here, content related about the Mexican War for Independence and also about the Latin American revolutions in South America. That'll include Argentina, it'll include Venezuela. We'll look at questions of leadership, because another source of comparison that you have in these different revolutions includes the roles of people like Simón Bolívar or Father Hidalgo or Toussaint Louverture. So you might kind of examine the relationship between some of the leaders and the followers. That might be another kind of thrust for looking at some of the causes of the war. How much was leadership kind of a significant value? Okay, so I'll leave it there for this. I will post a sample paper just so you can see what one looks like that actually, was taken by somebody after a 2-year IB course. So cut yourself a little slack because you're just starting, your journey in this, and we have some time to grow a little bit. But for the content assistance, I will also post some optional in-depth resources for you. They are useful if you have specific questions that you don't feel like the sources you have are answering. And this is kind of like a different strokes for different folks kind of things. Some of you will like the review video, and that will be helpful. Some of you will look at the HODA text, read that very closely, and that will be helpful. Some of you might look at the optional readings and find them very helpful. So they're optional for that reason, but you may use part of them because they help you answer a question in detail that you have, and you want to fill in some blanks for yourself. Okay, so feel free to keep adding to your notes before Friday. Okay, there's no AI for this, so just a a shout out. There's no AI for this. One of the sources that I post is an argument from an historian by the name of Klooster and Wooster rather, and I will do a little outline for you of that argument so you can see kind of the source, read the historian, and then also kind of compare and contrast your notes to the argument outline that gets posed on Schoology. And again, that'll be part of the optional sources. Okay, be well.